Yes. I walked in a little late, so I hope I'm not asking about something that was already covered, but Mr. Kaye, you mentioned in your talk that you are a former member of the APA. I suspect there's a little story there. I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that a little. Thank you.
Sure. Well, the story is simply the story of my political awakening on this issue. When I joined the APA as a student, as a graduate student just a few blocks from here at the Wright Institute, I was told that's the kind of thing you need to do to have a career in this field and go ahead, which isn't true, but that's, it was cheap to join, so I did. And I started reading some of their literature, and it was, it seemed very boring to me, very straight-laced, and very pro-military, among other things. It was the work of Stephen Soules, and reading the book by Jonathan Marks that I mentioned, another history book by Al McCoy, A Question of Torture, and that I slowly looked around me and said, wow, the APA is really heavily involved in this torture stuff. I didn't know, I'd never heard of De Leon. I hadn't heard of Martin Seligman except as the fellow who was involved with learned helplessness. Learned helplessness I did not associate with torture. I associated it with the treatment of depression. Yeah, the APA has a division now called Division of National Psychology, National Security Psychology. And they see in the Pentagon and the intelligence agencies big bucks for research and for themselves. It means jobs. It's an economic thing. It may be political for them as well, but it's an economic kind of thing. Now, to give you an idea of another part which we didn't put in the story, which we were talking about De Leon and the intervention with the Appropriations Committee to put in these kind of law changes that would take informed consent rights away from detainees. But at the same time, in the APA, they were changing the ethics code exactly the same time. They made two important changes. Ethics Code 1.02, which said that previously it is possible, if you work, let's say, for the government or a company, your ethics code, which essentially is similar to the Do No Harm code of the AMA, may come into conflict with that of your employers, let's say the government. And if that's the case, previously you were supposed to make known to your employers that you followed the ethics code and that was important to you, and somehow you try and work it out, but you had to make known your adherence to the ethics code. Also, there was, excuse me, that's not, so in 2000 and late 2001, around the same time with the change with USC 980, Title 10, which was about human experimentation, and a few months before the passage of, the signing of the Wolfowitz Directive, the APA implemented a new, or voted on a new ethics code. And in this ethics code, it now said, well, if you are in conflict with your employer or the government, you are now allowed, if you want to follow the strictures of the government authority or the employer authorities. In other words, you could obey orders and break your own ethics code. And they added a new part of the ethics code, 8.05, which they didn't have before, which allowed psychologists to dispense with the use of informed consent in research experiments, where, quote, permitted by law for federal or institutional regulations. This was all at the same time as the Wolfowitz Directive was happening. So you can see, the APA helped Brain Trust, the CIA and the Department of Defense's program into interrogation, torture, and experiments on human subjects for a variety of reasons. And so I've gone beyond why I answer your question, but you gave me an opportunity to talk about 8.05. After a great fight within the APA and critics of the APA changed the rules again, just I believe earlier this year. And they rescinded the old language, the language from 1.02, and now said, yeah, you can't break your ethics code if it goes against human rights or something like that. Certainly it was better, and they took out the language about you had to adhere, it was okay to adhere to what your bosses or authorities said about breaking your rules. But they left intact 8.05. So to this very day, according to the American Psychological Association, it is okay to dispense with informed consent in research, just as it was okay for the Nazi doctors to do so.
Deborah?
Well, a comment, and I'm really interested what you guys have to say. I noticed in the headlines that one Martin Siegelman has been awarded a new contract. This was today. And the contract is to provide psychological services for returning veterans with PTSD.
31 million.
Right, that's a no-bid contract. The Salon reported a story that Martin Seligman, one of the architects of the torture program, the learned helplessness that Jeff spoke about, which also Jane Mayer speaks about in her book, The Dark Side. I have to say that with regard to no-bid contracts, it certainly raises suspicions and calls for some questions. I think that we've seen over the years that the government has awarded numerous no-bid contracts to a wide range of companies, individuals, which is obviously very highly controversial because it does raise questions as to what's behind it. Halliburton is actually a perfect example, Blackwater. So I think that article raised important questions that we don't have any answers to, and I'm not quite sure exactly what else is behind that. I suspect that there's more to be revealed there as well. Did you want to say anything on that? Yes, ma'am?
Yes, thank you both for your work. This morning at another event with the Meta Nonviolent Center, we were discussing the capacity of human beings to accept doing this kind of torture and to also accept that it is going on, or to accept the continuation of it. And when you were speaking, sorry, I forgot your first name, Jeff. No, not Jeff. Jason. Yeah, when you were speaking, Jason, you talked about the fact that some people can accept that there's torture going on in the country, but they can't, it's just crazy making for them to think of experimentation. Well, for me, the idea of accepting that there's torture going on and then dismissing it, denying that it is an urgent issue, that it slips over into a whole other arena. I look at these pictures of John Yoo, and he's just a smiling guy, just like the rest of us, and it brings me to the question of there being a captain who has taught this stuff in the room, and you said he's just a nice guy,
I have to cut you off there. I have to, because this is part of the problem, ma'am, is that people are not grasping the information that I'm disclosing, that Jeff's disclosing. He did not teach this stuff, okay? He didn't, and you really do need to. He was a SEER instructor. Your understanding of SEER, unfortunately, because it was co-opted by individuals like Bruce Jessen, James Mitchell, who reverse engineered it to use it against detainees, he's not a torturer, okay? He's not. Just as not, I can make numerous comparisons, but I need to emphasize that to you so you understand it.
However, it would be better to understand who this person is and what he actually has done, and being that I know, 10 or 20 people just like you, I would rather be questioning him as to what he has done, what he feels became of this SEER program, what kind of way he feels we can move in to controlling our government, which is trying to control
I think that
us.
those are incredibly important questions, and that's why I left open that I know Captain Kearns will be happy to answer all of those questions. But when you say that people are accepting torture, that's actually, it's a fact. They're willing to accept it. They're willing to say, okay, my country tortured. But I think it's also important to be armed with information, and to be armed with the right information, and to understand that there were certain things that were done that, the same way that John Yoo twisted the law, took a medical benefit statute, an obscure 2000 benefit statute, in order to redefine severe pain. But we do not blame the lawmakers who put that legislation and that law into place after John Yoo happened to, take it upon himself to do that.
I differ with you there. I do blame the people who started SEER, because I believe that it was the germ of what this thing has become. And I'm suspecting that there are many people with whom this gentleman, or whoever he is in the room, I don't know, has been associated, who were all for bringing the American public to accept.
I appreciate your questions. I'm not sure where you're, I deal with facts, so I'm not sure where your facts are coming from. It's more of a statement that you're asserting.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Because you did inform us that the gentleman was in.
Yes, he's quoted in the article, and he has a very important